Well, hello, everyone. I'm Kelly Clement, documentary programmer for the 2021 Mill Valley Film Festival. And I want to thank all our sponsors for turning out for the festival in this very challenging year we find ourselves in. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce some of the filmmakers who created the films you've just watched. We have John Antonelli and Will Parrinello, producers of The New Environmentalists. You have Daniel Dietrich and Chance Cutrano with Tulel, the killing of the native species. And Clara Mokri, who along with Katie Bernstein, our director of Anchored Out. So here we are. We are very honored to be screening your wonderful new short documentaries at this year's Mill Valley Film Festival. Now, these are true life tales, all by extraordinarily talented filmmakers from the Bay Area. And they give us an intimate look at how these dramatic times we're living in are challenging us to dream of a new future. And each year, I look forward to putting together a program of documentary shorts, all done by local filmmakers. And we always have very lively Q&As at these films you've just seen. And these films in particular are so powerful, we could easily have a 20-minute Q&A on each one of them. But since we're online and we're limited to 20 minutes, I think that I'll just jump right in and ask a couple of questions about each of your films, and then we can open it up for discussion between all of us. So my first question usually is, how did these filmic journeys all begin? What inspired you to tell the story of these passionate activists who have such a profound effect on others? So start off with the New Environmentalists. This is a program that is a tradition with the Mill Valley Film Festival that we do every year. Now, how many years have we been doing the New Environmentalists?
Must be,
I believe,
19 or so, yeah.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think it might be 18. Might be 18 this year, yeah. But we're thrilled to be here. Thank you for hosting us again, for inviting us. It's an honor for us to be screening with the festival.
Yes, definitely. Now, you didn't get to do one last year, is that right?
We did do it, but it wasn't, normally the films are tied to a ceremony that happens at the Opera House in San Francisco for the Goldman Environmental Prize. But it was a virtual ceremony last year and this year, and probably next year still. We just found out, yeah.
Well, you come together with 6 very powerful episodes of ordinary people affecting extraordinary changes. And how do you find out about them and then focus on these dedicated activists?
Well, all of the protagonists in our film are recipients of the Goldman Environmental Prize. And the Goldman Prize is often referred to as the Green Nobel Prize. So every year for, I believe it's been 36 or 37 years now, the prize recognizes 6 grassroots environmental activists from around the world who have achieved a seemingly unachievable goal. And people are selected in every, I believe the term they use, every inhabited, corner of the earth. So, all continents and a 6th category, which is considered islands and island nations. And so we're lucky enough to be able to work with the prize to tell these stories. And so John and Matt Yamashita, our fellow producer director, and I every year have the wonderful task of deciding who's going to go to which country to tell which story. And when we began that process many years ago, we all thought, well, there's one story that's better than another. And there was this perception that, well, you're getting to tell the better story than I'm telling. And what we realized after our first year, every story is fantastic. And oftentimes a story on paper that seems like it might be less appealing for whatever reason. You're going to Siberia in the middle of the winter where it's going to be 40 below zero, as an example of one reason you might want to stay away from one story over another. That story is just as powerful as another. They're all incredible. They're all amazing human beings who are doing so much to protect the earth. And so they inspire us and our, filmmaking teams. And so it's a joy every year to tell these stories.
Yeah, and quite a challenge too, because you're on a schedule. You have to put
Yeah,
together the team and get them out there in the field, and then bring it
Yeah.
all back in and edit it.
It was more challenging this past year because, of course, we couldn't go to the places and we had to put together remote crews in the 6 different locations to shoot them. This year we did actually go to Louisiana to shoot, but last year the one that we just looked at today is we were in the field shooting. I was in Myanmar and Paris, and COVID had started, but we had no idea how devastating it was going to be. So like we went from Myanmar to Paris to shoot on the same trip, and while we were in Paris, no one knew it was ever going to hit Paris. And then maybe a month or so later, all of the horror started unfolding there and everywhere else in the world.
Ooh, man. And now you're probably on another schedule, right? For the next year's.
We're about to start. We find out in November who the people are that we're filming, and then by December we usually do 1 or 2 of the stories, and then another 2 in January, another 2 in February, and then we finish them entirely by April, typically.
Well, it's amazing what you do.
yeah, yeah. And I was in Chile working on another film, and then went to Ecuador to tell the story of Demente Ninkimo, who's a Waorani indigenous leader, who's one of the stories in the film, right before COVID lockdown. So I got back from a month in South America on March 12th, 2020, and I think the lockdown was probably the 14th or the 15th. So we literally, as John was describing with his trip to Myanmar and to Paris, we were coming back from South America, a cinematographer and myself, and we just got back. And, we were lucky, obviously, to get back. Maybe the films and the prize might have been canceled if we hadn't been out filming, honestly, when we were.
And many of those people that you were filming ended up struck with COVID, that tribe.
Yeah, I was wondering, I was going to ask you, have they been able to see these films, your subjects?
They have inevitably, but, at first, because of the lockdown and the challenges of COVID, very little happened. I mean, everything sort of went on hold for 6 months, quite literally. And the Waorani in Ecuador, the story there is they're fighting against oil exploration. And the way the law works, the Constitution provides for free, prior, and informed consent for the indigenous people if the government or any corporations, any business entities have proposals for business plans. So as an example, if the oil company is given permits by the government to go and explore and they find oil, first step is they make a presentation to the indigenous people with not only a plan for the work, but an environmental impact assessment study. And they didn't do that. And so the people there said, absolutely not. We're not going to allow oil exploration. We've seen what's happened around the Amazon. They're on the headwaters of the Amazon in the northern part of the country, the northeastern part of Ecuador. And so they fought against that. Sadly, there were allegations from the Waorani tribe that the oil company was intentionally sending people in to the remote tribal regions who had COVID with the idea that spread COVID among a group of people who have lower resistance, because this is a tribe that was uncontacted, literally had not been in contact with the outside world until the late 1950s. And so their resistance is lower than other folks, around the world might have. So it was a challenge, and they fought really hard to keep everyone safe, to keep outsiders from coming in. And they got away relatively unscathed, but they lost a few elders. And the elders there are such fonts of knowledge of indigenous wisdom and language. And, they use medicinal plants. It's a remarkable place, because when you walk through the rainforest, to us, to the uninitiated, it seems that we would be lost in seconds. And there are no paths in certain places, and people can see the most minute little detail, like a leaf is broken. And this is where the people going ahead who we might have lost on our way on the trail into the woods have gone, because here's this tiny leaf amidst, millions of leaves. It's just kind of a remarkable experience to be in the rainforest with people who who know how to live. You know, if the world comes to an end, that's where I would go if they would have me, because they would be able to survive.
Well, we are very lucky that you've made a record of this and shared with us. And now I want to go on to these next two shorts that I decided to put together with the new Environmentalists to fill out a program. And these next two shorts are about powerful issues that are currently generating headlines and articles in our own local newspapers. So I want to ask you about Anchored Out, Clara. How did this journey for you begin? It's a very controversial subject, and it's still a reminder of the shortage of affordable housing debate we have here in the Bay Area. And no doubt many will have varying opinions and reactions to this film. So what attracted you to this local drama and that has been going on for years and years?
So I guess the journey started, to answer your first question, at UC Berkeley. So Katie and I were grad students at the J School, and we were trying to figure out like what to do for our thesis film. And because of COVID, we kind of both had to pivot to more local stories. And I first became aware of the Anchor Out community from a colleague of mine who lives on a houseboat in Sausalito. And she was telling me about this woman, Kim, who had recently maced the harbor master. And so I was very curious about that and wanted to talk to her. And she was an incredible person who welcomed Katie and I into her world and her community, and was extremely generous with her time and her candidness and her honesty and just her space. And so from there on, we spent a few months just meeting people without our cameras, talking to Einstein and to a few others. And we finally narrowed it down to which characters we wanted to use in the film, which ended up being Kim and Einstein, the first two people we met. So that just was a coincidence. And I guess the reason we were drawn to the story was just because both of us live in the Bay Area, and yet had never even heard about the Anchor Outs. And it's just a really unique aspect to the housing crisis, which affects so many different people in so many different parts of the Bay Area in so many different ways. So that's kind of how we ended up where we are. Yeah.
And it was wonderful. I really appreciated how you showed both sides. You talked to people from both sides of this issue. It's still ongoing.
Yeah, definitely ongoing.
So right now, the plan is to evict all the Anchor Outs within 5 years. Can you give us an update on the folks that we met in your film?
Yeah, so both pretty much Kim and Einstein are both still out there, still fighting their fight. And that's the last time we spoke to them. They both had seen the film and were really happy with it, and are continuing to stand their ground and resist the eviction.
Wow. And did it take you a while to get their trust to show them in a film?
Yeah, it's funny. They both, we know it didn't really take a while at all, which is like, we're really grateful for that and very fortunate, because it definitely could have. But they were just both such incredible people and so eager and willing to have their stories heard that the trust came pretty quickly. I think for Kim in particular, us both being women was a huge factor in that. And Einstein, he's just a great person and very generous with his, like I said about Kim, but they're both very generous with their time and life. So. And
is Kim still awaiting trial?
She has not gone to trial yet, but so I guess, yes, she is still awaiting trial, but there have been like movements towards the trial, actions being taken. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, now I want to go to Tule elk, the killing of a native species. And this is another documentary on a very complex issue, and that I'm sure will generate a lot of debate locally. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in it, Daniel and Chance.
Well, Tule elk are a native species to Point Reyes National Seashore. And the film highlights the highly unpopular decision by the National Park Service to kill some of the Tule elk to free up grass for cattle that graze inside the national park. And this is part of a much more complex and unpopular plan to expand agriculture use inside Point Reyes National Seashore. And Chance can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think the film was attempting to capture at least one story arc within this larger saga of Point Reyes National Seashore, which is, what to do about the management conflicts between commercial agricultural operators within a national park and the native wildlife that live in the national park, that are one of the hallmarks of endangered species restoration in the state of California's history. And at the same time, you get a couple different characters. You have the animal rights activists that have become charged throughout this discussion over the last 4 to 5 years as the Park Service has rolled out its new plan. You also have the historic environmentalists who have relatives that go back to the signing with John F. Kennedy. You have other conservation organizations that have been involved since the start of this process, and then our local electeds that have also weighed in on the issue in various ways, introducing legislation and attempting to change the course of history for the park during this public process as well. So tried to capture some of these different strands as we're moving along here.
Yeah. And it's something, it would seem like it's the competing interests of commercial ranchers, conservationists, and just the general public in this ongoing story that seems to have escalated recently. So just this last month, the National Park Service issued a management plan to limit the Tule elk herd, and while at the same time extending commercial cattle ranching leases. So conservationist goals are to obtain more land for the elk has been denied. Now, it would seem like the competing interests with commercial ranchers and conservationists in the public is ongoing. So what's happening? What's going to happen?
Go ahead, Chance. You can chat on that.
Sure. So the plan was finalized by the National Park Service to allow for 20-year leases, as well as diversification of agricultural operations. So not only farm stays and like the bed and breakfast farm tour type things, but also for new livestock to come onto the seashore and be raised commercially. And at the same time, as you said, killing of elk based on sort of an artificial, throw a dart at the wall, sort of see what number might make sense in order to sustain the current level of commercial agriculture in the park. And the process is not complete. There are a couple more steps where they have to present this final plan to state agencies and things like that. But the whole plan started because the Park Service was not following federal procedure, and so they were taken to the Ninth Circuit Court, and that's how this plan was developed in the first place. And so there's always this angle that's ongoing, and that's how it goes throughout the West, where if a plan continues to be problematic or impair environmental values and resources for future generations, that could be brought back to the courts, and that's where that discussion could be hashed out again. So there are a couple of things that we foresee in this saga as it continues.
Well, your film is very effective, and I'm just wondering what else are local activists doing about this?
Yeah, there's been quite a groundswell of support. The public is very involved now, and if you look at the open comment periods, over 90% of the public opposed ranching in the park. The California Coastal Commission had a meeting where they received over 50, I think around 50,000 comments. The very, very vast majority of them opposing ranching in the seashore. 100,000 petitions were driven by one of the activists across the country to Deb Haaland's office. So the public has really become further engaged in this issue. It's a national park, and for us to be killing native Tule elk in a national park and introducing sheep and goats and potentially artichokes and mobile slaughterhouses, it's a land use issue. It's really what is the original intent of the national park? Was it in perpetuity ranching, or was it for the public and for the wildlife and for the protection of natural resources? So there is quite a groundswell right now of activists and organizations, and it's garnered a lot more attention. It's been featured in Nat Geo and the LA Times, and the Chronicle, and the Hill, and so it's really become much more active in the last year or so. And the people want it to be a national park and not to be privatized with private for-profit businesses.
Yeah, go ahead, Will.
I'd like to ask a question, if I may.
Yeah.
What can we do? What can viewers do to support the Tule elk and to support our Indigenous brothers and sisters, the Miwok and the Pomo, who I know don't want to see the cattle ranching continue out there? Is there anything that we can do to help?
I think there are a couple of things. There are a number of engaged organizations that are sort of the watchdog organizations, or taking the Park Service and other agencies to task. So like restorepointreyesseashore.org is one site. And then there are a couple affiliate organizations involved. For Elk is strictly about the elk. And I think the other thing is to, go enjoy the park. And if you encounter some of the issues that we hear about, where people are run off of the land, or people run into issues or have conflicts with the ranching operations out there, things like that, or see something that seems strange. Some birders just stumbled upon one of the ranchers bulldozing a very important sensitive riparian habitat, one of the creeks that leads to Drake's Estero, and then another stumbled upon a massive vehicle dump yard. And so those things were notified to the park, to the state, and investigations are ongoing. And so just need more boots on the ground, people not only enjoying the park, but letting the Park Service know that, hey, something doesn't seem right here, something like that is always super helpful.
Are you hopeful that things will change?
Well, we're always hopeful, right? It's been a real challenging at least 5 years. This process started quite some time ago, and it can get discouraging when you're working so hard and you're trying to protect this incredible iconic animal that's been reintroduced to the park, that's native and endemic to the park. California, it's an endemic animal to California, and the only national park that has Tule elk. To work so hard and then to hear the park have a number that they're going to keep them at and kill others to ensure grass for cows. It is frustrating and hard. You fight against the agriculture expansion, and then the new plan has sheep and sheep and goats and other domestic animals. So it can be frustrating. We always remain hopeful, and it's a national park, and I think in the end. It should be a national park, and that's where we're hoping we get to.
Great. Well, I wanted to ask all of you, we don't have much time left, but I wanted to ask all of you, what other projects do you have coming up? Clara, you want to start?
So I'm a photographer as well. So I've been doing a lot of freelance photojournalism work since graduating. So I kind of pivoted my focus back to photography after spending the last year working on this film and just trying to figure out how to balance both being a cinematographer and being a photographer as a career. So I guess just trying to be an adult. is what's next.
Yeah, films seem to take up a lot of time and energy, don't they? So what's next, do you think? Do you have any ideas for another film?
I've not at the moment. No, I've just, like I said, been focusing on photography and photo projects.
Great. And what about you, Will? I know that you've got something in the works.
I have a film called Water for Life that's in post-production. It's a 90-minute feature documentary that looks at 3 water keepers in Central and South America, Indigenous people who are fighting to protect their precious water resources and their ways of life from the exploitation of corporations, big business, governments, always sadly corrupt, and people who are corrupting the process in a way not unlike the story in the New Environmentalists that's happening in Ecuador there with large oil corporations. In our instance, it's extractive industry, gold mining, hydroelectric power, which we think of as being clean and green, which it often is not, and large-scale agricultural timber industry. So with any luck, that film will be done sometime in 2022. Funding is always an ongoing challenge, but the fact that we're in post and close is exciting.
Oh, I'm dying to see it.
Thanks.
How about you,
So am
John?
I.
You know, I started working on a film in Haiti 2, maybe 3 years ago that Nat Geo was funding, but it's just been stalled, you know, since COVID for a variety of reasons. And you all know the story of what's going on in Haiti these days.
Yeah.
So every time I plan a trip there to film, it gets short-circuited. And even the local crews that I was working with have actually left the country because it was too dangerous for them to be there. So I don't know when or how it's going to happen, but you know, I'm hopeful it will.
Well, we're all rooting behind you for it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And Chance and Daniel, have you ever thought about expanding this film?
Yeah, I have quite a few things in the work right now. I recently finished following a bobcat family, a suburban bobcat family, for over a year, and I've got an enormous library of footage from that I'm putting together now to possibly tell a suburban bobcat story. I have a couple of other natural history behaviors from a couple of different animals as well. And then been doing a bit of contract work for a couple of other documentaries that are coming out in the natural history space. So it's been busy filming for those. As far as the park, of course, there's a lot going on still. You know, the Tule elk were just one small part, and a very important and certainly emotional part of this greater plan that's happening. But there's a lot more to be told, and there's a lot more that we're discussing to see what's the right approach to continue this fight.
Wow. Well, thank you. And well, we've about run out of time, but I want to thank you all so much for making these incredibly important films. And I hope lots of people get to see them out there. And best of luck on all your future projects.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for having us.